program on our great afternoon smorgasbord. So, Don Barnett, thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate it. And also, Dean Reichart, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And were you born in Rapid City then, Don?
Well, I was born in Hot Springs at the VA hospital there that the feds are threatening to close, which is sad. But my father worked for the utility company there in the Black Hills Corporation. But I lived in Rapid City from age 4 on and was elected in 1971.
How old were you when you were elected?
I was 28.
Just a young man, and I'm sure looking forward to serving Rapid City. And then that horrific night came about in 1972 that I'm sure still haunts you from virtually every day, Don.
Well, we think about it a lot, that's for sure. As we talked about last week, and Dean knows this too, you know, there were 2 terrible moments in South Dakota history. The Battle of Wounded Knee, which really wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. And then the flood in 1972, and about 600 people perished in those 2 terrible events. And Dean was on the front line that night, pulling people out of Canyon Lake and up and down the stream there, and he's one of the real heroes in Rapid City.
Dean, were you born in Rapid City?
You talking to me?
Yeah, were you born in Rapid City, Dean?
I grew up in northeast Nebraska.
Okay, and then when did you move to Rapid City?
I come to Rapid City to the Air Force in 1953, February.
All right, okay. And then following that, you were a member of the Rapid City Fire Department.
That's right. I started in September of 56.
Okay, so you had been a fireman for several years before that tragic flood night.
That's right.
Dean, what was your first when you were first notified that you were needed and it looked like a bad situation for Rapid City?
Well, I think, you know, the time frame, time gets away with you, so you're not sure exactly. But I think it was around 9:30 or 8:30, 8:45. The first call come in that there was heavy rain and starting to flood in the valley in the Schroeder Road area, which is way west of Rapid City up on the hill. And we just dispatched a brush truck there with 2 people, and then little later, probably, I'm guessing 9:30, someplace in there, 10 o'clock, a call come in that it was heavy rain and there was flooding in Dark Canyon area.
Mm-hmm.
So we sent a crew up there, and then they verified that it was, and they started to evacuate people, told them they had to get out there, and that's how it started to us, to the fire department, and we put a call in to all the firemen to come back at that time. So.
Dean, were you one of those that were going door to door to notify the people living in West Rapid because of the flood that was coming down?
No, I wasn't. I was deputy chief at that time. Ken Johnson was fire chief. And we dispatched those trucks from the downtown station that went up to the Dark Canyon area to start with. And then when that happened, then we dispatched some other units that went to just above Canyon Lake, the Chapel Valley Road there.
Sure.
And Brayburn Addition. And they went in there and told the people that they needed to evacuate, to be prepared for it, because there was heavy rain and possible flooding coming, and it was bad because they just laughed at them. They said, "There ain't no way we're leaving here. Look how far we are from the creek. It ain't going to happen." And unfortunately, it happened, and they lost a lot of lives in that area.
You lost some of your firemen too, Dean.
Yes, that was later on. That was probably about 12:30 or 12 o'clock, 12:15, someplace in that area. And they went back, and they was the bridge that goes into the Chapel Valley area, that bridge just above Canyon Lake. The water was clear up to the bridge, and the police were there, and they wouldn't let anybody go across it. They parked the truck on Jackson Boulevard, and the crew of 4 walked in there, and they was telling them they had to get out, and there was a lot of people walking out across the bridge. And then that big surge of water come that had been from Dark Canyon and Brayburn area, and it just washed everything away. That's when George Carter and Mike Summers and Henry Tank. That's when they lost their lives. There was a fourth one with them on that crew, and he was in a house in that area along the creek with an old lady, and she wouldn't get out, and the water come and it picked the house up and started to float it, and it started to wash downstream. He threw off his bunker coat and knocked the window out and climbed up the electrical service onto the roof. And he rode that house across Canyon Lake, and when it hit the bank on the other side above the dam area, it started to break up, and he jumped off and he ran up to Jackson Boulevard. He had to get 37 stitches in his arm, but he survived, and he stayed with the department about 5 months, and then he quit. He said, I just can't take this.
Dean, go back in your own memory. Is there a day goes by that still some of the memories and the horrible things that happened still in your mind virtually every day, Dean?
Yeah, you think about it a lot, and you think, people just don't realize how bad water can be when it gets to moving and it's got depth to it. There was a lot of people that we seen and heard about that climbed up on the kitchen table, put a chair on the top of the table, poked a hole in the ceiling, and climbed up in the attic and survived.
Chapel Valley itself, and for our listeners, that's in West Rapid, just after you go past Canyon Lake. And then if you're going west, you turn to the left. That's where the Stavsherka is. And was that area
No, that didn't get flooded, but that was the road that went into that area.
Sure.
And there was a lot of houses back then right along that
sure.
Rapid Creek area there.
That was one of the
back there.
That was one of the choice areas, I believe, to live in Rapid, wasn't it? All the homes along Rapid Creek there?
It was. They got big bucks for those houses.
My goodness. Then, of course, later, you and the other firemen and many others, police department, volunteers, out on rescue. Talk a little about that, Dean. What do you remember of that?
Well, I can remember one incident and it was probably, I'm guessing, and time again gets away from you. You can't even remember the time, really. I think it was probably about 2 o'clock or 1:30, someplace in there. I was on Jackson Boulevard. There was a large Black Hills Power and Light truck there, one of those big four-wheelers that had a big winch on the front of it.
All right.
When I got there, they had lost one boat already, and there was a Scout, International Scout. You know what they were? It was an SUV, early one, and it was in Rapid Creek in the channel, but it was being held there by a downed tree. And there was a Kerry Connors. He was later on the fire department, but he was there, and another guy, and I don't know who the other guy was. But they had commandeered another boat after the first one got away from them. And it was a bigger boat, open, flat bottom, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And we hooked the cable onto that, from that big Black Hills Power and Light truck, and let the boat back down to that Scout that was there. It was probably about 60, 80 feet down there, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a husband and wife and 2 children on it. And we got them into the boat, got them back up to Jackson Boulevard, and I believe they lost 2 members of that family. I think their name was Masters. He was a pastor, I believe. It kind of fades away, the names, but I think that's Masters was his name. And he lost 2 children. They did, I'm sure. And one of them they didn't find for quite a while, but I think they did find it later on. It was a young child.
Dean, talk about...
pretty gross.
Oh, talk about Dean, too, then. One of the firemen, sometime later, way east of Rapid City, you found his helmet.
I remember something about that, but I can't tell you too much about that.
I can help you on that.
Whether that was
Grant, there is a fireman whose name was Tank, a very senior member, and by the way, his daughter is now the city clerk in Keystone. And his helmet, he was the one that probably went over the dam there at Canyon Lake. It was an earthen dam that had been built about 1909. Mm-hmm. It wasn't built to any federal or state or local standard. And in all the floods they'd had in the 20th century, they were always afraid Canyon Lake would fail. And it did fail in 1972. But Tank was such a fine man. I knew him very well. And he probably rode over that dam before it collapsed. And then his body was not found for some time, but his helmet was found several miles downstream. It was tossed around with probably millions of tons of debris and water, and an excavator 4 or 5 years later found the hat, and it had his name in it, and reported right away to the police department, and they traced it to Officer Tank. He's a very fine man. All of them were fine men. They were courageous, helping others, doing things beyond common sense, doing everything they could to minimize the loss of life. Our civil servants are never appreciated to the degree they should be. And Dean and the leaders of the fire department just did a wonderful job that night. And without their bravery, the list of the people who passed away or were killed in the flood, the list would be much, much longer. That was true of our police department and also true of the National Guard. They just did everything humanly possible to try to limit the amount of loss, but they failed many times. We lost 3 firemen and 3 National Guardsmen and 7 of the men from Ellsworth who were also involved in rescue. Mm-hmm. It was a night of more heroes than we can write about, really. And a lot of those heroes are now on the wall right there by the Civic Center where we list the people who perished. And those stories will never be told, but a lot of people are walking around today because of the bravery of those people.